So how is Bill Gates involved in this effort to number every person on the planet? So ID 2020 is what it's called. Back in May of 2016, the first ID 2020 summit was held at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And this summit brought together about 400 people from 150 private sector companies and 11 UN agencies to discuss how to, here it is, to provide a unique digital identity to every person on the planet, including the 1.5 billion people living without any form of recognized identification. Some of the companies that were in attendance were Bloomberg, Brigham Young University, Cisco Systems, Cornell University, Ernst & Young, Forbes, Google, IBM, JP Morgan, Microsoft, i.e. Bill Gates, and NASDAQ. These were just some of them. And the two main outcomes from the meeting were, number one, widespread consensus among these ID 2020 attendees that identity is both a fundamental human right and a necessary prerequisite for the success of the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations socialistic plan to govern the world. They said everybody, for this to be successful, everybody's got to have their own unique identification number. Number two, remember, this is the United Nations, the seat of world government in the earth. Number two, there was sweeping commitments from the conference attendees, i.e. Microsoft, Bill Gates. You say, well, this has went away. Oh, no, it hasn't. No, these guys are working feverishly to get this thing done. So there were sweeping commitments from all of these attendees to contribute towards the shared goal of this universal digital identity. Now, these are the only efforts on the planet, everybody, ID 2020 and ID 40 by the World Bank. They're all working in cahoots to give every person on the planet their own unique digital identity, or a unique identification number, if you will. And remember the prophecy, the Antichrist is going to usurp authority over a global numbering system. Everybody's going to be given a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Without that, they're not going to be able to buy or sell. Now, I want to make sure you caught something. The world government, the United Nations, views a universal digital identity as an absolute necessity for the success of their global governing scheme to transform the world by 2030. These Sustainable Development Goals. You say, well, what does Bill Gates have to do with this today? Well, he is very, very, very involved. Remember, he was one of the original companies. They had all of the big major tech companies at the meeting in 2016. Microsoft was there, i.e. Bill Gates. So, in reading, I was reading a blog by Bill Gates, his own personal Bill Gates blog. And the title of the blog was Making the World's Invisible People Visible. And this is what's going through the mind of Bill Gates. But besides the vaccine, okay? And you know that now he has retired from the board of Microsoft, and he's putting he's full steam ahead in these two efforts, numbering people and giving them a vaccine. Now, they could be tied together. You say, well, that proves it right there. He's going to give everybody a shot, a vaccine that's going to have a chip in it. No, that's not what I said, because we don't know that for sure. I couldn't document that. But, however, he is working on these vaccines, and I would encourage you to do some research between Bill Gates and Fauci. I'm not going to get into all that. I don't really have time to. But they're pretty connected, to say the least. So I would encourage you, on your own time, there's some homework. Go do some checking in all these people that are working on this stuff. And, you know, hopefully Trump knows about it. I think he probably does. He's a pretty smart guy. But anyway, what's going on in the mind of Bill Gates? Well, this is January, just over a year ago, 2019. So he's a year past this. But this is Bill Gates, and I'm quoting from his blog. He wrote this. He said, how do you prove you really are who you say you are. In the United States and many rich countries, that's easy. We have many ways to prove our identity: a birth certificate, a driver's license, Social Security card, or a passport. You ask yourself, why is Bill Gates so involved in Africa and all these underdeveloped countries? Because that's what they're focusing on. The world, the international community, is trying to number every person on the planet. They already see the United States as numbered. You understand what I'm saying here? And so they're going after the 1 to 1.5 billion people that are not numbered yet. Some of them across the Middle East, Africa, different places, war-torn places where people have had to migrate. They're trying to number all of them. And so they say that the United States and all these developed countries, they're already numbered. We're going to work on these people. But Bill Gates goes on to say, but imagine for a moment that you're one of the estimated 1 billion people in the world, most of them among the poorest and the most vulnerable, who have no official identification, no birth certificates, no official ID documents, nothing. He says, without a way to prove who you are, you would face huge problems going to school. Now, he's acknowledging this. In other words, you're not going to be able to go to school. You're not going to be able to see a doctor, receiving government services, getting a bank account, finding a job, traveling across a border, having access to many other rights and services most of us take for granted. So he's acknowledging, hey, without this ID, you would be nameless in the eyes of the government and largely ignored. They're saying you need to have a digital ID or you're not going to be able to have a job. No insurance, no health care, no education for your children. And there are many countries that they're already there. But they're going after the 1 to 1.5 billion who don't have that. Everybody else, they're numbered. We're going after these guys. And that's what one of the main things in the Sustainable Development Goals, if you study them. So he goes on to say, Bill Gates, for the last decade, Nandan Nilekani has been working to make these things in these invisible people in India. This is the Aadhaar system. Invisible people, as he calls them, visible by giving them access to official identification. One of India's leading technology entrepreneurs, Nandan, has joined the government of India to lead the launch of India's national biometric ID system, which uses fingerprints and other biological traits to verify the identities of more than 1.3 billion residents. The ID system, Aadhaar, which is Hindi for a foundation, is the world's largest biometric identification system and has become a valuable platform for delivering social welfare programs and other government services. Here it is. Now Nandan, now this is Bill Gates writing this, now Nandan is working with the World Bank Group, or ID40. Remember I said there's two efforts, ID 2020, which is Bill Gates, and then you have the World Bank, ID40, to help other countries build their own digital identification systems. Advances in biometrics, data management, mobile phones, and other technologies are making it possible to provide people with verifiable digital identity simply, quickly, and securely. At the same time, there is growing awareness in the global community that with a proof of ID, the world's poorest people have a powerful tool to be seen, heard, and improve their lives. Giving everyone access to a legal identity, this is Bill Gates writing, giving everyone access to a legal identity is one of the targets of the global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's global goals for the United Nations to govern every single person on the planet. They have to number them. And it was never possible, you understand, until the invention of the computer, the invention of the internet. It's never possible. It's a 2,000-year-old prophecy, everybody, that everyone on earth is going to be given their own unique identification number. That was not possible until the invention of the computer and the internet. 2,000 years ago, John prophesied this. We're watching the system being put in place. And more donors, including Ahmadiyar Network, and here it is, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are supporting efforts, ID 2020, to achieve this goal. They're all working hand in hand with the United Nations and the World Bank to implement a global numbering system. Again, the World Bank, the international community, already views the United States and other developed nations. They're already numbered. So we're not worried about them. We're worried about these immigrants and people from a war-torn country they had to leave, or people that are underdeveloped countries. We're worried about them because we're trying to create a world governing system. We don't want 1.5 billion people who don't have a legal ID not to be able to function in our system. So we can't just go in and help them and teach them how to grow crops and this, that, and the other. We've got to go in and make sure they all have a national ID. Think about that. This world has functioned for 6,000 years now without national IDs. But now, over the last, 20 years, everybody's been getting them. Why? Because there's an effort to control everybody. And you can't control people if you haven't numbered them. They've got to be in your database. So while Bill Gates continues, he said, while progress is being made to launch more identification systems, many people around the world still lack identification of any kind. And according to the latest estimates by the World Bank, there, again, are about a billion people in the world without an official proof of identity, including 45% of the population of the sub-Saharan Africa and 17% of South Asia's population. So the world is moving closer to the day, this is Bill Gates, when everyone will have access to an official ID. That's their goal. Remember that the ID 2020 met back in 2016, launching this. And he says, Bill Gates says, the sooner we can achieve this goal, the sooner the world's poorest residents will not only be able to prove who they are, but also realize their aspirations for better lives. So you want to know what one of the main things Bill Gates is working on? That's what's in his mindset, is getting everybody numbered in, because he's working with ID 2020. ID 2020 is one of the main efforts to do this. Bill Gates is all on board with the international community's efforts to number every person on the planet. So he's in the thick of this. And again, though, a lot of people have speculated, is he the Antichrist? He is not the Antichrist. He might be helping to build the system, the numbering system, that would be used by the eventual Antichrist. But Bill Gates is not the Antichrist. The Bible specifically tells us the Antichrist comes out of the revived Holy Roman Empire, which is the current European Union. He's an up-and-coming politician somewhere. He's at least alive on the earth. Whether he's involved in politics today, I don't know, probably is. But we don't know who he is at this point. But now you can see Bill Gates has got his hands in a lot of stuff. And a lot of people that you probably would recognize their name, they're involved with him. And so we're just watching to see how all this stuff plays out according to the prophecies. So I want to make sure before I end the program today that you know about the Sustainable Development Goals. You say, I don't really care about all that stuff. Well, yeah, you should. Because the Sustainable Development Goals, they were unanimously adopted by 193 members of the United Nations. The Obama administration signed us onto that back in 2015, America. So it's the United Nations effort to govern the planet, and the Obama administration signed us on lock, stock, and barrel to commit to that and to adhere to that and to implement that in 2015. And these goals make up the international community's, this 15-year, from 2015 to 2030, their socialistic blueprint of global governance for every person on the planet. It's Agenda 2030. So it's aptly named Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I mean, that year the Pope was on board, and so these were the goals laid out by the United Nations, and a lot of it was devoted to the global, human-induced global warming, which is climate change, which is their propaganda. And then this was signed in September of 2015. In December of that year is when the nations gave financial commitments and goals to implement climate-friendly goals, like, hey, we're gonna do away with so much carbon emissions, and we're gonna offer up X amount of money. We're gonna pledge X amount of money to these goals that you guys are trying to do. That's what the Paris Climate Agreement was all about. Thankfully, Donald Trump has pulled us out of that because he realized that was a never-ending money pit and was sucking us up into world government. So he pulled us out. And I'm thankful that he did that. But so the goal of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or the Sustainable Development Goals, is a universal policy agenda, and it's designed to convert the nations of the world into a global community governed by the United Nations. They don't want borders. They're trying to do away with borders. They're trying to do away with any kind of inequality. They're trying to do away with, really, in essence, they want to be able to govern by way of governments around the world. They want to be able to dictate what's going on. Hey, you need to apply, you guys, all you nations of the world, you guys signed on to this. Now let's get on board. Start implementing our plan. And like I said, the Obama administration signed us on to that. So the agenda is comprised of 17 main goals and 169 focused targets under each of those 17 goals designed to manage the planet. I call it socialistic because the plan includes the socialistic principle of wealth redistribution, and it states specifically the reduction of inequality will only be possible if wealth is shared and income equality is addressed. That's socialism. And I might add this really quick. We've talked about socialism, communism on this show many times. The end time world government's going to be socialistic. Imagine socialism being implemented here in the United States and our shelves being bare. You think the toilet paper and the paper towels and things are bare now. Imagine socialism being fully implemented here in the United States. Most of the shelves would be empty. I mean, you think it's bad now. It can get a lot worse than this, folks. I can still go into the grocery store, pick up some meat and potatoes, and go home and have a pretty good dinner. Let socialism be fully implemented here. Let's see what happens then. Everybody that's bantering for socialism, that's what they want to implement globally. Look at Venezuela. Like I'm saying, it could get a whole lot worse than it is now. The coronavirus thing is bad, yes, but it could get a lot worse. And so think about that when it comes time to vote. So it's the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the global governance of every aspect of every person on earth. And the plan states that it says we commit to making fundamental changes in the way that our societies produce and consume goods and services, what kind of food you eat, what you produce, governments, international organizations, the business sector, and other non-state actors and individuals must contribute to changing unsustainable consumption and production patterns. How you farm, I mean, everything. And so the propaganda is that humans are using the earth's resources at such a rate that nothing will be left for future generations. And therefore, the United Nations, this world government, must establish a master plan to govern the earth's citizens. And in their eyes, they have to, number one, in a true socialistic format, redistribute the wealth of the world so everyone is considered equal. Two, they want to control the production and consumption of every person, i.e. school lunches, everything. You've seen some of these things start to be implemented. They're striving to achieve universal health care, socialism, control the climate, manage our cities and infrastructure, govern the oceans, and govern the land usage along with all ecosystems. I'm talking about all the way down to the local level. You say, well, I live out on a farm, I'll be exempted. Oh, no, you won't. Not if this is fully implemented. These people want to govern every aspect of every person on the planet. Now, again, thankfully, we know from the prophecies of the Bible that this will not be implemented in the United States, but I'm telling you, there's a website. Go to a website called We Are Still In. That's the name of the website. We Are Still In. You can look at the governors, the businesses, the states, everybody that has said, hey, even though Donald Trump pulled us out of this Paris Climate Agreement and all these things, they're saying we are still in here in the United States. And I scratch my head going, what in the world are you guys trying to do? I don't understand. You're playing, you're dancing to the fiddle of the United Nations. Well, that's what they want. And so go check out the website, We Are Still In, and see who's involved. Is your state still in? And so these are the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is world government, everybody. And the problem is, it's the administration of the plan. You know, what's the old saying? You can't manage what you can't measure. So consider the size of this effort. There's more than 7 billion people on the earth right now. And target 8 of goal number 3, remember there's 17 goals. Target 8 of that is to achieve universal health care. Well, how do you roll out a system of universal health care and monitor it effectively? You can't go by a name because there are thousands of John Smiths in the United States alone. And that's why the only conceivable solution to track and the administration of that plan is to ensure every human has a unique identification number. Now you understand how it's all coming into place here. Now you understand why ID 2020 was created, to give everybody, in order for the Sustainable Development Goals to be implemented and they can govern every person on the planet, they have to be numbered. They have to be in a digital database. They have to have a digital identity. And when they look back and said, whoa, hold on. We want to implement this, but there's about 1 to 1.5 billion people that don't have a digital identity. We've got to come up with some kind of a scheme to get them on board. And so that's what they're trying to do right now. You can read article after article on ID 2020 and what they're trying to do around the world. Bill Gates is involved in this stuff up to his eyeballs. He's working with these people. And vaccines may be involved. I just started seeing some of that stuff the other day. And I don't know, I hate to even mention it. I need to document this, but it's possible. I saw where they might be leveraging vaccines to get people to get a digital ID number. Now, I saw the word leveraging in there. Don't quote me on that because I need to document that a little more, but that's some of the research I'm doing right now. They would leverage these things to try to get people to get digital IDs. It's horrible, but yet that's what they're trying to do. Now, I need to document that a little more. I want to say that before we move on. But under goals 16.8 and 16.9, the Transforming Our World, this 2030 agenda for the sustainable development actually says, as we embark on this collective journey or global governance, we pledge that no one will be left behind, i.e. the 1 to 1.5 billion people that have no number or no digital identity according to the World Bank and the Internet and the United Nations. And goal 16 of target 8 and goal 9 of the Sustainable Development Goals both strive to include every person on earth in this ever-expanding global governing system of the United Nations. 16.8 says that we want to broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries in the institution of global governance. They're not trying to hide what they're doing. And then Goal 16.9 says by 2030, we want to provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. So they're not only going after the people that have no digital identity, but every child that is born, they want to make sure they have a digital identity as well, in order for the elite to establish a true global government. In their mind, it has to include every single person on the planet. It makes no difference if they live in a jungle or they exist in the slums of an inner city somewhere or make up the poorest of the poor. And, you know, you can understand their desire to want to help the poor. We have a lot of poor people on the planet. And, you know, we can offer to give them, I can offer, I mean, if I was wanting to help the poor, sure, I could give them a bowl of soup or provide a bath for them or a place to sleep for the night or even a new pair of shoes or something like that. It's simple. It's simply the right thing to do. The problem is forcing these individuals to receive legal identification papers or an identification number in order to gain access to some of these provisions. Now, that's where it gets into totalitarianism, everybody. And so that's kind of what's going on right now. I wanted to give you kind of an overall view. Now, you can read for yourself and this, that, and the other, but make sure you don't buy into some propaganda that's out there. But there are some deviant things going on in the world, and I want to look at it through the eyes of Bible prophecy. Now, when we talk about the mark of the beast being implemented, at this point, it's not. I mean, when on this grand timeline, what are we looking at? The Bible says that a peace agreement is going to be signed between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That's going to start the final 7 years. Halfway into that final 7 years, so 3.5 years in, the Bible says the Antichrist will stand in a rebuilt Jewish temple and proclaim to be God. At that point, for the next 3.5 years, during the Great Tribulation, that's when the mark of the beast is administered. You say, well, then why are we talking about this tattoo and all these other things? These are precursors. I mean, they are desensitizing people to say, hey, we're going to put a mark of identification on your person and it's going to have your own personal records. Now, whether this happens or not, I don't know. I know that I've read about it and this is what they're talking about. And Bill Gates, they're involved in it. But at the end of the day, whether it fully comes to fruition, I don't know. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But I just want to give you a heads up today, because right now it's not time for the mark of the beast to be rolled out, but we are watching precursors to the eventual number system that could be used by the Antichrist to administer the mark of the beast.